I had the whole day off, and the weather outside was miserable. Cold rain had been falling on and off since morning, and the occasional gust of wind rattled the windows. I spent the day indoors, playing video games and keeping warm. By late afternoon, the storm intensified, with distant flashes of lightning illuminating the gray sky. As evening settled in, I decided to cook dinner and watch a horror movie, letting the eerie ambiance of the storm add to the experience. I turned off all the lights and got comfortable on the couch. The rain drummed relentlessly against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees outside. The movie played for nearly 2 hours, and during that time, the storm reached its peak, thunder cracking violently, shaking the walls. Despite the chaos outside, there were no power outages, only the occasional flicker of the lights. When the movie ended, I wasn't particularly tired yet, so I stretched my legs and went to the kitchen to refill my water. That's when I saw it. A movement in the hallway. Just a flicker of a shadow gliding along the wall, gone as soon as it appeared. I froze. It had been quick, too quick to tell if I had truly seen something or if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the reflection of lightning through the window. Maybe I was just jumpy from the movie. I stood there for a moment, staring down the dark hallway before finally shaking it off. I refilled my glass and glanced outside. The storm had turned the roads into small rivers, and the trees swayed violently under the heavy wind. We didn't get storms like this often, and the town definitely wasn't built for them. I returned to the couch, turning on YouTube to distract myself before bed. I wasn't really paying attention to the videos, my mind still half focused on that shadow. Then, it happened again. This time I saw it more clearly, a shadow moving just behind the TV, as if something was peeking around the corner. My heart pounded as I whipped my head around to look at the doorway. Nothing. The living room was empty. I stood up, my breath unsteady, and walked over to the hallway. I looked around, checking each doorway, but everything was exactly as it should be. No signs of movement, no sounds. Just the storm raging outside. Trying to shake off the unease, I told myself I was just imagining things. Still, that lingering feeling, that creeping sensation at the back of my mind, wouldn't go away. After another 15 minutes, I decided to head upstairs. I wasn't exactly sleepy, but I figured a warm shower would help me relax. The hot water was comforting, drowning out the storm outside. I started to calm down. Then, a sudden violent thud shook the entire house. My blood ran cold. It wasn't thunder. The sound came from inside. I turned off the water, heart pounding, and quickly got dressed. The silence that followed was suffocating, so quiet that my ears rang. I stepped out into the hallway, moving cautiously down the stairs, the floor creaking beneath my weight. The house felt different now, heavier, like something was watching. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped dead in my tracks. The back door was wide open, barely hanging onto its top hinge. The wood around the other hinges was splintered, as if it had been violently ripped apart. Shards of broken door littered the floor. My stomach twisted. Someone had been inside. Heart hammering, I bolted upstairs, locking myself in the bathroom and calling 911. I sat there, barely breathing, waiting for what felt like an eternity. Every second stretched unbearably long. Was someone still in the house? Were they hiding somewhere, waiting? When the police arrived, I rushed downstairs to meet them. They searched the entire house, but found no one. That should have been comforting. But it wasn't, because then we realized something much worse. The door hadn't been broken from the outside. It had been forced open from within, as if someone had left the house in a fit of rage. The thought made my skin crawl. Whoever it was, they had been inside for a long time, watching, moving just out of sight every time I looked. And when they left violently. I never felt safe in that house again. It was last winter. I can't recall exactly when, but I remember the snow was relentless that week, piling high enough to make going outside a hassle. I worked a hybrid schedule, sometimes from home, sometimes in the office, but with the weather so bad, I stayed home all week, working from a small desk in my bedroom. My house was modest, just a single story with 2 bedrooms. That day, I woke up, made coffee, and sat down to work, staying at my desk until 8 p.m. Outside, the wind howled and snowflakes swirled under the streetlights. When I finally got up, I made dinner, tidied up, then stepped outside to bring the trash bins down to the curb. As I walked back to the front door, something odd caught my eye. The snow to the left of my house looked disturbed. Everywhere else it lay smooth and untouched, but here something had clearly moved through it. I stepped closer, and my stomach tightened. Footprints. A single line of them weaving their way up to the side of my house. They led straight to my bedroom window. I stood frozen, my breath curling in the frigid air. The thought made my skin crawl. Someone had been outside, in the middle of a snowstorm, standing just beneath my window. I had kept the blinds shut, but slivers of light still leaked through the cracks. Had they been watching me? Forcing myself to move, I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just some kid messing around. Still, a deep unease settled in my gut. I checked the locks twice before heading to bed at 11 o'clock. Before turning in, I peeked out the window one last time. The snow had already filled in the old tracks. No new ones had appeared. I felt a little better. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the window again. My stomach dropped. Fresh prints. They were identical to the ones before, stopping right beneath my window. My blood ran cold. Whoever had been here last night had come back. I threw on my jacket and boots, rushing outside. The footprints stood out sharply against the untouched snow around them. I scanned the street, my yard, my neighbor's property. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Shaken, I went back inside and called the non-emergency police line. I knew there wasn't much they could do, but I wanted it on record. If something happened, at least they'd know. I kept checking the window throughout the day, watching as the falling snow slowly erased the footprints. By nightfall, they were completely gone. At 8 o'clock, I finished work. The night outside was eerily quiet, save for the occasional gust of wind rattling against the house. I stood, stretched, then walked over to the window. Pushing the blinds aside, I exhaled in relief. The snow was smooth and untouched. Then my gaze dropped lower, and my breath caught in my throat. The latch. It was undone. I had triple-checked it the night before. I knew I had, and yet, now, it was unlatched, the window slightly loose in its frame. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I pushed. The window slid open effortlessly. They had been here. They had unlocked it. And if they had done that, had they gotten inside? A deep, creeping dread settled over me. I backed away, scanning the room, then stepped into the hallway. My heart pounded as I moved toward the front door, Every shadow felt alive, every corner hiding something unseen. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my boots, and bolted outside to my car, locking the doors behind me. I called the police and sat there, staring at my house, heart hammering. 10 agonizing minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. An officer stepped out, nodding to me before heading inside to check the house. I watched the front door anxiously, time dragging as I waited. 5 minutes passed, too long. Then, finally, the officer emerged, dragging a man in handcuffs. Both of them were covered in blood. My stomach twisted as the officer shoved the man into the back of the squad car. "He was hiding in a hallway closet," the officer said, catching his breath. "Jumped me the second I opened it." The man, middle-aged, disheveled, eyes wild, stared at me through the car window. There was something empty and dark in his gaze, something evil. I don't know what he had planned, but he had been inside my house, waiting, watching, and I don't want to think about what would have happened if I hadn't checked that latch. By Nathaniel, I was visiting my parents over spring break. This was the first time I tried out Airbnb since the city I was going to was small and Airbnbs were cheap there. I made the 2-day drive and pulled in just after the sun had set. As I parked in the driveway and got my stuff out of the car, I looked around at the neighborhood. The atmosphere felt a little off. It was very dark and eerily quiet. No streetlights on the road, no people walking around or driving, and the Airbnb home I was staying at was the only house with its lights on. It wasn't even that late, but the other houses were completely dark. Maybe things around here were just different, I thought. I headed into the house and unpacked my things. I had no plans for the night, aside from resting from the long drive and getting comfortable at the rental. I ate some snacks and turned on a movie in the bedroom. A couple of hours went by. It was probably around 9 or 10 when I heard something outside the room. I paused the TV and listened. There it was again, a knock at the front door. I immediately checked my phone, thinking maybe the host had called or messaged me, but I had nothing. The knocking continued without pause, so I got up and walked to the door. Whoever was outside seemed persistent, which made me believe it wasn't just a random salesman or someone lost. I opened the door. Standing there was a man in his 30s wearing a black winter hat and a distressed red flannel. He looked confused when he saw me. "Hi," I said. He awkwardly smiled, then his face returned to a blank, expressionless state. He mumbled something under his breath, turned around, and walked away without another word. I stood there in disbelief, watching him disappear into the darkness before locking the door behind me. The whole encounter left me unsettled. Why knock so insistently if he had nothing to say? Maybe he had the wrong house and was too embarrassed to explain. The rest of the night passed without incident. The next morning, I went to visit my parents and stayed out until about 6 p.m. When I returned, I was exhausted, so I spent the evening in the bedroom watching TV and unwinding. Then, at around 9 p.m., the knocking returned. This time, I was more worried than confused. I cautiously approached the door, checking the peephole first. It was the same man, in the same outfit. My stomach dropped. This time, I only cracked open the door slightly. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man's reaction was eerily identical to last night, except more exaggerated. He looked genuinely surprised to see me again, like he had expected someone else. "Is everything okay?" Were you looking for someone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stared at me with a hollow expression and, in a monotone voice, simply said, "No." Then, just like before, he turned and walked away. I shut and locked the door, my heart racing. Something about this felt deeply wrong. I decided to leave the bedroom door open to the hallway so I could hear better in case anything else happened. Hours passed, and eventually I turned off the lights and went to bed. But something woke me up in the middle of the night. My room was pitch black, completely silent. I wasn't sure what had woken me, but then I heard it, faint whispering outside. My breath caught in my throat. A moment later, loud, harsh knocking rattled the front door. My blood ran cold. I climbed out of bed and crept into the hallway. The knocking grew more violent, shaking the whole house. As I neared the front door, something moved past one of the windows on the other side of the hallway. I froze. Peering through the peephole, I saw the same man, but this time there was someone else lurking in the shadows behind him. My adrenaline spiked. My mind screamed at me to run, but before I could move, I turned my head slightly and locked eyes with another man staring at me through the back window. Panic took over. I sprinted back into the bedroom and locked the door. I could hear multiple sets of footsteps circling the house. Not just a couple. Dozens. My hands shook as I dialed the police. As I waited, I heard windows and doors being tested, fingers scraping against the glass, handles rattling. Time slowed to an excruciating crawl. Then, finally, sirens in the distance. The moment the sirens grew close, the men scattered. Within seconds, it was as if they had never been there. When the police arrived, I explained everything. Since the house was an Airbnb, they contacted the host, who strangely seemed more annoyed than concerned. His reaction didn't sit right with me. The police never uncovered any more details, but I've had years to think about it. My best guess? Maybe the previous guest knew these men, and they had unfinished business with him. Maybe they thought I was hiding him. Or maybe they were just looking for an easy target. Either way, I've never felt safe in an Airbnb since.